Once again, welcome to the program. Reactions have been trailing news that leader of the Russian paramilitary organization Wagner Group was killed in a plane crash on Wednesday. Authorities say Prigozhin was among 10 people aboard his private aircraft when it crashed near Moscow. Among the dead also is Prigozhin's right-hand man, Dmitry Utkin. The plane itself, an Embraer Legacy 600, was said to have been in good condition, and it will be extremely unusual and rare for it to fall from the sky. President Vladimir Putin, who is attending the BRICS summit virtually, is yet to comment on the situation.
The Wagner mercenary chief, Yevgeny Prigozhin's name was listed in the manifesto as being a passenger on the plane which crashed in the evening north of Moscow. No survivors were rescued from the scene of the crash. Russia's Emergency Situations Ministry said in a statement that the aircraft, which had been traveling from Moscow to St. Petersburg, had crashed near the village of Kuzenkino in the Tver region. It said 10 people had been on board, including 3 crew members. One eyewitness from a village close to the site of the plane crash said they heard a bang before seeing the jet fall from the sky. By Thursday morning, several pieces of the aircraft were seen. At least 3 body bags were being stretchered away from one of the sites of the crash. A telegram channel linked to Wagner, Grey Zone, pronounced Prigozhin dead. It, however, hailed him as a hero and a patriot, who it said had died at the hands of unidentified people it called traitors to Russia. The 62-year-old Yevgeny Prigozhin was one of the most visible faces of what Russia called a special military operation, having rescued thousands of prisoners to fight for Wagner and feuded openly with the Defense Ministry over military plans and ammunition supplies. For decades, he had been known as Putin's chef due to his company's Kremlin catering contracts. It is unclear how friendly he and the Russian President Vladimir Putin were, but they knew each other, and both men were born and raised in St. Petersburg. After serving a long prison sentence in the 1980s, Prigozhin started selling hot dogs in his hometown. He soon began to build up a stake in a chain of supermarkets and eventually opened his own restaurant and catering company. Prigozhin admitted in September 2022 he founded the private military group in 2014, the year Russia annexed Crimea from Ukraine. It was his first public confirmation of a link he had previously denied and sued journalists for reporting. The Wagner Group has fought in Libya, Syria, the Central African Republic and Mali, among other countries. In May 2023, the group seized the eastern Ukrainian city of Bakhmut after some of the conflict's most brutal fighting. During the onslaught, he broke the taboos of Putin's tightly controlled political system with foul-mouthed insults of Moscow's top brass. Afterwards, he issued a video thanking the Kremlin, even as he launched into his favorite rant, the alleged treachery of Putin's top brass, in particular Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu and Defense General Valery Gerasimov. On May 5th, he showed a field of dead Wagner mercenaries he said had perished due to a lack of munitions caused by Shoigu and Gerasimov. In the last known video of the Russian mercenary chief posted on Telegram, Prigozhin is seen standing in a desert area in camouflage and carrying a rifle in his hands. In the distance are more armed men and a pickup truck. Offices around St. Petersburg had flowers and candles mourning the late leader. Close to the building housing Wagner forces in St. Petersburg, 2 masked men said they were members of the mercenary group. One said he was lost for words following news Prigozhin may have been killed in the plane crash. There have been mixed reactions in Moscow, however. One respondent said he thought it was a game, and there could have been another plane. Another said it was a matter of honor to kill him off. Then another said he thought he was a hero. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said in a press conference Ukraine had nothing to do with the crash that killed Prigozhin.
Це точно. Я думаю, всі усвідомлюють, хто має відношення.
And staying with reactions to news of Mr. Prigozhin's death, many Ukrainians have mixed feelings about what has happened. While some Ukrainians are full of joy, others believe the plane crash meant Russia's government will tighten its grip onto power. Another said he believed the Wagner boss staged his death in order to flee so that no one knows where he is hiding. Another said that he should not have headed to Moscow at all, referring to the time after the mutiny championed by Prigozhin in Russia. The respondent says that Russia never forgives such mutinies and that Prigozhin's demise was to be expected. Yet another person said the plane crash means the people in power in Russia will stick to their ideas and will keep everyone under control, and that destruction of opponents only proves it. Senior consulting fellow at Chatham House, Akir Gills, said that absolute certainty is required before assuming that Russia's most powerful mercenary was killed in the plane crash. There has been no official declaration to speculation that Prigozhin faked his own death, as he was a marked man due to the failed mutiny in the month of June this year. Well, he says that it remains to be seen what would happen to the rest of Prigozhin's Wagner mercenary group and its surviving leadership, and whether they will be absorbed into the Russian armed forces.
There doesn't seem to be any doubt that this aircraft was attacked in one form or another. In fact, the biggest debate at the moment is whether it was a bomb on board or a missile that actually struck it from the ground. One of the most striking things about that is the way it's taken for granted that in Russia this is a normal and natural way of dealing with the enemies of the state. It's barely raised an eyebrow. We need to wait until it's absolutely 100% certain that this was Yevgeny Prigozhin on board before assuming that he is actually dead, because another feature of dealing with Russia that analysts of Russia get used to very quickly is that so often nothing is what it seems on the surface, and what the Russian state says is often very different from what's happened in real life. In fact, some people are suggesting this might be a means for Prigozhin to fake his own death and disappear, because, after all, he already knows that he's a marked man. As soon as he raised this mutiny against Moscow, he put a target on his own back, and there might be a reason for it. He wants to drop out of sight. Putin comes out of this looking stronger. This was the kind of theatrical means of dealing with a potential opponent that seems to be the norm in Russia for demonstrating that you should not stand up against power. For as long as Prigozhin survived, he set a dangerous precedent, because he said to other people that you can confront Moscow and live to tell the tale. And that may have given other people ideas. Now, those other people that might have been thinking of making a stand for themselves will be rapidly reassessing their risk calculus right now, after realizing that, yes, as so often before, Russia's power has caught up with somebody that challenged it long after the event.
Joining us now to further explore the developments is Chairman, Nigerians in Diaspora Organization in Moscow, Russia, Dr. Godwin Ibe. Dr. Ibe, thank you so much for joining us on The World Today.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you, viewers, for tuning in.
All right. There are growing conspiracy theories about what may have happened to Prigozhin's aircraft. What do you think happened? And was the crash as a result of a mechanical fault, or do you think that could have been shot down by Russia?
The truth is that the claims that have been put are all plausible, because it could have been a bomb or it could have been shot down. It could also be mechanical failure, as a combustion engine, you know, so an engine failure could also lead to fire and explosion. All claims put forward are plausible, but what is in doubt is the outcome of the plane destruction, if Prigozhin was there or Prigozhin wasn't. But according to official reports by the Federal Agency for Transport, Air Transport Agency, Rosaviatsya, as it's called in Russia, has said that Prigozhin and Utkin, two top commanders in Wagner group were on the flight and thus were killed. I think we need to, for those who are doubtful and who do not like to believe official source of information, we want to wait for a while and see if this turns out to be true or not. But the bodies need to be found. As at the last time I checked, 4 bodies had been found. That means we are still expecting 6. So let's see if it will be corroborated.
All right, but let's explore a bit of possibility here. Prigozhin may have been killed, that this was an assassination, as suggested by some quarters. But was Prigozhin a man with a target on his back because of the mutiny in Russia earlier this year?
Well, if everyone likes you, then you have achieved nothing. It's impossible to be popular or to be successful without having enemies. For all his imperfections, as every imperfect human being, he's seen as a hero in Russia. He's loved by so many people. He's extremely popular. And like we say in Nigeria, soldier come, soldier go, barrack remain. Yeah. So whatever he stood for, whatever dreams or goals he fought for, there are so many people behind that dream, behind that vision. And there'll be people who we want to continue from where he stopped. So yeah, once every popular person has targets on their back, I would also like to tell you that for people who like to say these assassinations are too common in Russia, I'd like to remind you that there are so many people who have been killed in Russia who are against the Ukrainian position. For example, Daria Dugina, which was quite popular, Vladimir Tatarsky, which was bombed in St. Petersburg. This was in Russia, but they were against the Western views. And we also have people who were murdered in the US, like even sitting presidents, Robert Kennedy, John F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King. So anyone who says this political assassinations is something that is limited to one country is just practicing hypocrisy. But for all his imperfections, may his soul rest in peace. It's not the day to talk about his imperfection. It's a day to respect the fact that this man was a hero to so many Russians, and whatever his views were, there are so many people behind those views. And if you follow Russian channels, whether Telegram and local or mainstream or non-mainstream platforms, you will see that lots of Russians really love Prigozhin. And of course, there were 2 commanders there, Prigozhin and Utkin, on that flight, according to official information.
But Dr. Ebi, let me take your words from there when you said soldier come, soldier go, barracks would always remain. What do you think would happen now to the Wagner mercenary group without Prigozhin there?
There are reports that, unconfirmed report, let me call it that, Russian President Vladimir Putin has suggested that a guy known, a senior mercenary known as Sidoy, take over. If that is true, it's left to be known. But the point is that that's just an example of the fact that there are so many people that could replace Prigozhin. Prigozhin mainly wasn't even involved in operation, to the best of my knowledge. He was like the media director. He had this aura, he had charisma and all of that. But the main operations were carried out by the commanders, and Utkin was one of them, one of the top commanders that died in this affair. But there are many more like him, like Sido, and so many more that can take over operations. But the only thing is, the difference we might see is maybe more integration into the Ministry of Defense, and because whether it's true or scripted, as some people might like to say, there was some public friction which led to the mutiny, and which the President Putin condemned. So maybe a change of leadership may bring more less animosity and more tete-a-tete and cooperation with the official Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation.
Let's talk about the reaction from President Vladimir Putin. He's yet to comment on this crash and the possible death of Prigozhin. But what do you think is happening? Why do you think that is? I mean, he's not physically at the BRICS summit. He's just going there virtually. Is this a normal response for him?
It's not just a normal response, but it's actually expressing wisdom. Because when a case hasn't been fully investigated, you shouldn't be making loose comments in public, especially a figure whose words are taken so seriously. cut in bits and pieces, exaggerated and blown up or used as propaganda. I think for such a person of his caliber, he should wait for investigations to be over before he makes any sort of comment on this case. And I think he's done the right thing.
And so how do you think that all of this will affect or impact the war in Ukraine? I mean, President Volodymyr Zelensky has said that Ukraine had nothing to do with the plane crash, but I mean, is that good for Ukraine? What is going to happen going forward?
Like I rightly said, when intelligence agencies are involved in political assassination, they do not come out and say, yes, we did it. Yeah, I've given examples. Daria Dugina, who was murdered in cold blood in Moscow, her car was bombed. We have Vladimir Tatarsky, who was also assassinated. In fact, the Reuters article claimed that the U.S. suspected Ukraine to be involved. This was a mainstream media, let me put it this way. Yeah, it's actually terrible that this kind of political assassinations, if they exist, if they are true, do exist. But I think that it does not affect, like I said, soldier comes, soldier go, barrack remain. There are so many people behind the visions that these people stood for, and so finding a replacement won't be impossible, even though it might be a little bit challenging. And as you also know, this war in Ukraine, staged in Ukraine, maybe between Russia and NATO, has given a lot of military experience to both sides who are in. Russia is no more just a theoretical force; they are a practical force to contend with. People who had those kind of reputation was Israel and others who are involved in daily wars. But now Russia and Ukraine are seen as the best armies in the world right now.
So we've talked about reactions that came from Ukraine and people having mixed feelings. What is the reaction in Moscow, in Russia right now? What are people saying? Are they reacting to the fact that the president hasn't said anything about this incident? What is going on?
Most people, even those who doubt the death of Prigozhin, most of them want a tougher response on Ukraine if they are involved in it in any fashion. And like I always tell people, President Putin is one of the mildest of what you mean. If you just listen to what most people want, most people don't understand why, the military, special military operation is protracted this long. There are a lot of people, even Prigozhin is in that party. A lot of people who want a more decisive action, who want Russia to use its full potential. So I believe that a lot of people are infuriated by this death of, event that occurred, and are calling for a stronger response to this event. That's what most people feel.
Thank you very much for your contribution. Dr. Godwin Ibe is the chairman, Nigerians in Diaspora Organization in Moscow, Russia. Thanks a lot, and we'll definitely be keeping tabs on that story as it develops. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
And away from Prigozhin's death now, Ukraine's Navy and the military intelligence have carried out what they say is a special operation overnight in what units landed on Russian-occupied Ukraine. Well, the video released by the Defense Ministry's main Directorate of Intelligence shows a small motorboat moving through water at night near a coastline. It also said the landing point was on the western tip of Crimea, near the settlements of Lengvia and Mayak. Russia has not commented on that report. It was also Independence Day in Ukraine on Wednesday, and President Volodymyr Zelensky has vowed to end Russia's occupation of the Crimea Peninsula and all other areas that Moscow controls in his country. He told an international conference about Crimea, the region, which will be deoccupied like all other parts of Ukraine that are still under who he calls the occupier. Crimea was seized and annexed by Russia back in 2014 in a move not recognized by most countries, and Russia seized other parts of Ukraine in the full-scale invasion it launched in February 2022.
Господи, поверни додому усіх розпорошених і розсіяних своєї батьківщини цією війною.